सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
As you might have expected, this week's national interest is also about Manipur. This will make it our 5th national interest on Manipur in just a couple of months. This is, after all, the most important issue before our country right now. And again, as you might have expected, by now it's been a month, it's been more than a month. So this is also time for me to remind you and to make my appeal for paid subscriptions to ThePrint. Without that, we cannot keep it going. We, of all the other media organizations, so many big ones in India, we've kept track of every major story in the country. We have the finest reporters who've been traveling everywhere, including and especially in Manipur through these tumultuous weeks. All of this is possible only if people like you, fine, wonderful viewers and readers like you, take paid subscriptions to ThePrint. So please do that, and if you've done so already, please refill it or please renew it. Without that, we cannot keep going. So thank you very much to those who've contributed. Double thanks to those who renewed their contributions. And really, we need many more paid subscribers, both in India and overseas. That said, back to today's national interest. The BJP government under Chief Minister Biren Singh in Manipur, and by implication, the party nationally and the Modi government are all under attack over continuing anarchy in the state. In fact, a more apt description now would be civil war, because that's what's going on in Manipur. The BJP's defenders make their case on 3 arguments. Number 1, the state was never peaceful. If anything, the BJP has given it 6 years of relative peace. It was the Congress that divided the communities, which is read as ethnicities in the northeast mostly, over the decades. It can't be set right so soon. Argument 1. Argument 2, there is a larger foreign-inspired conspiracy behind the continuing violence. Why did the video that shamed and shook the nation, for example, become public 10 weeks after the incident? It was obviously time to coincide with the beginning of Parliament's monsoon session and to destabilize it. Number 3, this isn't said explicitly though, but implied broadly. Also, this is central to the social media counterattack by the BJP's warriors, that the largely Hindu Meithis are under attack from Christian cookies, armed Christian cookies, also getting armed from overseas, from Myanmar, and the church is playing a central role in the crisis. What's been said openly, including by Chief Minister Biren Singh, is that too many foreign, which means Myanmari cookies, are involved. There is also foreign hand. In fact, he insinuated the Chinese hand, and that the cookie tribals are forest encroachers, illicit poppy growers, drug smugglers and terrorists. Terrorist is an expression he has used for them more than once, and it's been widely reported in the national broadsheets. I'm not talking of any social media. Even as we reel and recoil under this national shame at the surfacing of the video, bearing our ugliest reality, we need to take a deep breath and calmly put these propositions to the test of facts, logic and history. First of all, the BJP is absolutely right to say that the state was never really fully normal, at least not since the mid-1970s. There were spells of political instability under the Congress, insurgencies, terrorism and inter-ethnic strife. Today, it is the Meithis and cookies at war with each other. In the past, it was cookies versus the Nagas, who in turn were at war with the Indian state. The Nagas were at war with the Indian state. Remember that the chief of the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, or NSCN, T. Moiba, is from Manipur. He is a Tangkhul Naga from Manipur, from Ukhrul. BJP is right to say also that they did inherit a troubled and deeply divided state from the Congress, which is also the reason the people of the state embraced them as a new political power to check out. But if the Congress had made a series of errors through the years, the BJP should have given the people real change. Instead, they gave them more of the same. They borrowed their key leadership in the Congress from the same Congress they call discredited. These names include Biren Singh. Instead of bringing about a substantive change in the political style and approach, the BJP government also persisted with their same policy of divisiveness, the same policy as the Congress had followed, although in the BJP's case, it took another dimension, and I will come to that in a minute. To understand how divisive, we need to track a series of statements made by the Chief Minister in the weeks leading up to the flare-up and even during its course. I am jumping chronology a bit because I am beginning with what he said on June 19 instead of many earlier utterances and signals. On June 19, after rapes and killings had been going on for several weeks and while the civil war still raged, he said, and I quote, "These acts must stop, mainly the SOO cookie militants." SOO stands for Suspension of Operations. That was an agreement, a tripartite agreement signed between the cookie rebel groups, the central government and the state government to suspend all operations. So he called them SOO cookie militants. So he said these acts must stop, mainly the SOO cookie militants should stop it, otherwise they will face the consequences. I also appeal to Methi people who are with arms not to do anything illegal. Why they are with arms and what kind of arms, he did not mention. Now again, read his statement carefully, hear this carefully. Both sides are armed, that we know, he has acknowledged that also, but he calls one militants and threatens them and appeals to his own, the Methis, and appeals to his own who are armed not to do anything illegal. No threat of consequences for them. If you are still not convinced this was divisive, check out his statement from May 29, again widely published, including in the Indian Express. And I again quote from it, and I quote, "We have launched ops against terrorists. We have launched ops against terrorists who have been attacking civilians using sophisticated weapons like M16s, AK-47s, sniper rifles." Now, who he is calling terrorists is not left in doubt by a series of other statements as well. More than once in tweets, now deleted. He's deleted all of them, or most of them, but screenshots have been kept. He responded to cookie critics who were demanding his resignation by calling them Myanmaris. To one who reminded him that Methis also live in Myanmar, he responded by saying, and I quote again, "But they do not demand their own homeland in that country, in Myanmar." Insinuation being that the cookies are doing so in India. Not confining himself to Myanmar, which is, by the way, a friendly government for India, such as it is the Myanmarese government or the junta, it is friendly for India. On July 1, he brought in China as well. Foreign hand can't be ruled out, he said. There is China nearby. This, along with his tweets and statements, in fact, with the same statement, he went on to say there is 398 kilometers of borders that's loosely guarded. I know there's a security force, but the border is porous. China is close by. We don't know what's happening. This, along with his tweets, screenshots, and statements, was reported in a story on ThePrint. I'm giving you a link with the description. There is more than sufficient evidence, therefore, to show that if the Congress in the past might have divided the state ethnically with its politics, the BJP was doing so now, both ethnically and also communally, which is new for the Northeast. The rest, the tendency to view this in Hindu-Christian terms or finding the dark shadow of the church somewhere, is rooted in the essential BJP ideology, particularly in a conflict where one of the antagonists is Hindu. From Assam and Meghalaya on CAA NRC, for example, from Assam and Meghalaya to Manipur now, this simplistic binary has failed the test of the complexities of the Northeast. Identity, which is identity of religion, caste, ethnicity, language, region, is supremely important in any part of the country. In the Northeast, however, the determinants of identity are way more numerous, complex and convoluted. The Nagas, for example, are one broad group. We say Nagas, Nagaland. The leaders of Naga Insurgency want a Naga limb, which means they also want what they see as Naga territories from other states. So they may be one broad tribe, one broad group, but they consist of 28 to 35 distinct tribes depending on who's counting, with their own languages, culture and history of warfare in the past. In Assam, the BJP embraces some Muslims, the natives, the native Muslims, but wants others, that is Bengali speaking immigrants who came in from Bangladesh or East Pakistan, they want them out based on CAA, NRC. They'd use the same laws, the same combination of laws to retain the Hindus. That's how CAA came up after NRC. So even if Hindus are proven foreigners, you can then use CAA to grant them Indian citizenship, but not to the Muslims. The Assamese, who campaigned for decades to get all foreigners out, won't make that Hindu-Muslim distinction. The central lesson is that the formulations on identity that might work in larger parts of the country do not apply in the Northeast. If you try to paint it with the same brush, the Northeast, you get a humiliating retreat as in Assam with CAA NRC because it led to sizable protests also in Meghalaya. Or what we are seeing right now in Manipur. Manipur, in fact, more than any other state, is one which defeats these Hindus as nationalists by default binary completely. While the insurgencies in the neighboring Nagaland and Mizoram were carried out by Christian tribes and often had the church helping them, the church was involved in many cases, particularly in Nagaland. The only substantive rebels in Manipur have been Meitei Hindus, even though they called themselves as communists. In the late 1970s, two armed groups emerged. The first and the most important, People's Liberation Army, PLA, was led by Namirakpam Biren Singh, who went to Lhasa with his comrades for training and arms and returned with his 18 key comrades in 1978 to start a quote-unquote revolutionary war in Manipur. He was captured in the famous Tekcham clash by the army's then Second Lieutenant Cyrus Eddy Pithavala of J&K Rifles in July of 1981. Pithavala finally finished his service as Major General in the army, and by pure coincidence, I ran into him. In fact, we met at the Republic Day reception at Rashtrapati Bhavan earlier this year. Second Lieutenant Pithavala then won an Ashok Chakra, our highest peacetime gallantry awards for this action, and Bisheshwar, later released, became a politician. His successor as the head of PLA, Kunj Bihari, was killed in 1985 in another clash with the army in Kodam Pokpi in 1985. The other group, Pripak, or People's Revolutionary Army of Kangle Park. I will explain to you what Kangle Park is. He was led by R.K. Tola Chandra Singh and, like the PLA, also professed communism. Tola Chandra was killed by the army again in an encounter later in November 1985 as well. In the wake of these two dying organizations rose many factions, at least a dozen at last count, of Kangle Park Communist Party. Kangle Park, as I had promised to explain to you, Kangle Park is the name for an ancient Manipuri civilization and culture that rose in the Imphal Valley. Importantly, all of these groups were fully Meitei and Hindu. If anything, the tribals were out of the fight through all of these decades. I mention this here and in such detail only to remind us all of the reality of the Northeast, that the region is complex, unique, challenging, and nothing is guaranteed to fail more spectacularly here than the idea that you could govern it by employing any Hindi heartland kind of binaries we might be more familiar with in Delhi. The broken Manipur today is evidence of that.